Hey guys, tonight we're going to talk about something you've probably never imagined whispering about while dozing off. What in the world did Noah's Ark smell like? I know, right? Not exactly your typical bedtime aroma. But stay with me. Picture this. Two of every animal on Earth trapped in a giant wooden boat floating endlessly through a rainstorm of biblical proportions. No air freshener, no windows, no Febreze, just life. And by life, I mean poop. So much poop. You're probably thinking, there's no way I'd survive 5 minutes in there. And you're right. You wouldn't. Not without fainting at least once. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself stepping aboard the Ark. The wood beneath your feet is soaked from the endless storm outside, and the air inside is, let's say, thick. The kind of thick you can feel in your nostrils. The first thing you notice isn't the sound of animals, or even the sway of the boat. It's the smell, a stew of damp hay, wet fur, raw wood, and, well, droppings. Lots of droppings. Elephant droppings, lion droppings, dodo droppings. They still existed, remember? You take a breath through your mouth, but that only makes it worse. It tastes like the inside of a goat barn during a heat wave. And here's a fun, bizarre question. Did Noah pack any ventilation? According to the original specs in Genesis, the Ark had one window. One. For the entire floating zoo. Imagine a cruise ship today with a single porthole. That's basically what Noah was working with. And it was raining, continuously. For 40 days and 40 nights. So that window? Probably wasn't much help. You make your way past a pair of giraffes lazily chewing on some leaves. Their breath smells like sour grass and old bananas. You try to find a quiet corner, maybe near the turtles. They smell less aggressive, but just then a camel sneezes. Right on you, warm, wet, biblical. You can't help but laugh, because what else can you do? This whole place is a mess, but it's also miraculous. Noah, according to the story, was over 500 years old when he built this beast of a boat. Not exactly peak construction age. And yet, here you are, inside a structure that allegedly could hold thousands of animals and enough food for months. No blueprint, no nails from Home Depot, just a command from God, some cypress wood, and a lot of faith. Some scholars say the Ark would have had over 35,000 species on board, if we're talking 2 of each kind. And kind is the key word here, because maybe kind meant general categories, not every single dog breed. So instead of Great Danes and Pomeranians, you just had 2 dogs. Basic, original recipe. Still, that's a lot of paws and claws and beaks and tails. And all of them producing byproducts. Ever wonder how they managed that part? Because the Bible doesn't go into much detail about the plumbing. And let's be honest, if you've ever cleaned up after even one guinea pig, you know how bad things can get. Now multiply that by, 2 hippos, 3 peacocks, a dozen rodents, and a couple of snakes that don't like to stay in their cages. You see where this is going. So maybe they had some kind of system. Sloped floors, perhaps, that drained into buckets, or pits filled with straw to absorb the, Some people have suggested that Noah and his sons spent most of their time shoveling and scooping. Divine zookeepers with very earthly tasks. Doesn't sound glamorous, but somebody had to do it. There's even a theory that certain animals were put into a kind of hibernation, a miracle sleep, to reduce noise, food needs, and of course, waste. It's a nice thought. Peaceful. Like a floating pet hotel with everyone napping through the storm. But if not, let's just say the daily chore list must have been the stuff of nightmares. You pass by the monkey section now. One of them throws a piece of fruit at your head. A little. Rude but understandable. Cabin fever affects us all. The air is warmer here, thick with fur and fermented mangoes. Somewhere nearby, a goat is chewing on the corner of a sack. You're not sure what was in it, but it smelled edible a few days ago. Less so now. And still, this ship sails on. One long, endless creak of wood on water. One ongoing symphony of bleats, growls, hisses, and the occasional blessed silence. At night, you imagine it was even more surreal. No lamps, just oil torches casting flickering shadows on the beams. Maybe Noah had time to sit and reflect, to ask himself, did I really remember the termites? Hopefully not, because termites on a wooden boat? That's a whole new disaster. The thing is, the Ark wasn't just a floating zoo. It was, in many ways, a giant olfactory experiment. We always imagine it from the outside, majestic, divine, the last refuge of life before the flood. But from the inside, it must have felt like the world's longest, smelliest camping trip. No one talks about that part during Sunday school. And yet it worked, or at least that's how the story goes. The storm passed, the waters receded, and the Ark found dry land. Maybe it creaked one last time as it came to rest. Maybe the animals stirred, confused but grateful. And maybe, just maybe, someone opened that one window and whispered, "Finally." Of course, historians still debate whether the flood was literal, metaphorical, regional, or mythological. Some think it reflects a real event passed down through ancient oral traditions. Others see it as purely symbolic, a story of survival, faith, and second chances. But none of that changes the very human question. If you had been on that Ark, would you have lasted a week? Let's be honest, you'd have begged the nearest dove to carry you out. Still, it's fun to wonder, and that's what tonight is about. You, lying there in bed, floating gently through time, curiosity drifting like a little wooden boat on the waters of imagination. And as the Ark disappears into the soft mist of history, the scent, awful, strange, unforgettable, fades too. You're safe now, back in the present. But the question lingers, doesn't it? What did Noah's Ark smell like? Let's not think too hard about it. Let's just keep floating. You're still drifting gently now, far away from the stench of the Ark. But the question leads you onward, deeper into the ancient world, where sandals slapped against sunburned stone, and miracles were always just around the corner. You lean, incurious, because tonight's next mystery is even weirder. Why did God ask people to build stuff so oddly? Think about it. The Ark was one thing, but then you've got the tabernacle, a mobile tent shrine full of gold-covered furniture and precise curtain measurements. Or the Tower of Babel, humanity's ancient attempt at divine real estate, built brick by confused brick. Even Jericho, with its bizarre battle plan of marching in circles and blowing trumpets, feels like the divine version of, "Trust me, it'll work." You reach out, brushing the edge of history as if pulling back an old curtain. And there it is, the blueprint for the tabernacle, given to Moses on Mount Sinai, buried in pages of cubits and acacia wood and scarlet thread. So many cubits, and loops, and clasps, and then more loops. It sounds less like a holy tent and more like a very ambitious IKEA project, one you will mess up halfway through, but to the ancient Israelites, it was sacred, a portable house for God himself. A cosmic Airbnb in the middle of the wilderness. You imagine walking inside it now. The desert wind is hushed behind thick curtains, and a strange silence hangs in the air. The light flickers from a golden lampstand, its 7 branches glowing, like stars. There's the smell again, only this time it's incense, sweet and spicy. Frankincense, myrrh, and something you can't quite name. Maybe cinnamon, maybe mystery. And yet even here, surrounded by divine craftsmanship, you can't help but wonder, why this design? Why not something simpler? Or at least easier to clean? The truth is, nobody really knows. Scholars have argued for centuries whether these instructions were symbolic, practical, or just a kind of divine test in patience. Some say every measurement and item had spiritual meaning. Others think it was a way to unify a wandering people under a shared physical expression of their faith. Build it this way, so you all believe together. But can you picture the builders, day after day in the desert heat, trying to figure, Out how to stitch goat hair into roof panels while sand gets everywhere. You know how annoying it is to get glitter out of your carpet? Sand is worse. Much worse. And still, they built it, piece by piece. With no blueprint software, no power tools. Just tools made from bronze, sweat, and belief. Eventually, the tabernacle was replaced by Solomon's temple, a more permanent stone version with cedar beams, golden cherubim, and floors polished until they shone like mirrors. Again, the instructions were elaborate. God seemed very, very into interior design. But what would it have felt like to step into that first temple? You imagine it. Golden walls glowing in the torchlight, the smell of burnt offerings rising like fog. Priests shuffling by in linen robes, whispering prayers, careful not to make a wrong move. One step out of place, and things could get fiery. Like, literally fiery, because there's that one famous story, the one about Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron. They brought unauthorized fire into the tabernacle. What that means exactly is still debated. Were they drunk? Were they experimenting? Were they just confused by all the loops and curtains? Whatever it was, the story ends with a sudden flame from the Lord and two very dead sons. Harsh, yes. But in ancient times, approaching the divine wasn't casual. It was awe. And awe back then came with consequences. You tiptoe further into the past and suddenly you're standing at the base of a new construction project. This one taller, much taller. The Tower of Babel. The air is dusty, filled with the clang of bricks. And shouting workers, everyone's determined to reach the heavens. They're stacking, lifting, sweating. Language hasn't failed them yet. It's one big ambitious dream, and nobody's stopping to ask if maybe, just maybe, God won't love being climbed like a ladder. And then, just as the top begins to pierce the clouds, chaos. Words twist in people's mouths. Sentences stumble and fall apart. One guy asks for a hammer and gets a bowl of soup. Another calls for bricks and ends up with a goat. It's hilarious, really. If it weren't also deeply confusing, you feel it. Your own tongue getting tangled. The world around you blurring with noise you suddenly don't understand. God, it seems, has a sense of humor. And perhaps a boundary. This was humanity reaching up without permission. No golden blueprint, no holy tent. Just ambition, and a bit too much pride. You take a step back, watching the tower crumble into legend. And again, the question lingers. Why these projects? Why the over-engineering? Was it about obedience? About symbolism? Or maybe, just maybe, about slowing people down enough to think, to reflect, to build together? Because there's something kind of beautiful about building with your hands, even when it makes no sense. Even when the design seems ridiculous, it forces you to be present, to listen, to try. And the Bible is filled with these moments of absurd requests, impossible blueprints, and people, ordinary people, actually going through with them. Imagine if that happened today. A prophet shows up at your house, says, "God told me to tell you to build a 3-story coffee shop shaped like a whale." Would you even get to the part where he says amen before slamming the door? Back then, you didn't slam the door. You started measuring. And sometimes, just sometimes, the absurd made way for the sacred. As the ancient winds settle, and the last echoes of hammering fade, you lie still again. You're breathing slow. The curtain falls once more between you and the mysteries of the past. You smile to yourself, sleepy now, because the next time you look at a building and think, who designed this thing? You'll remember loops, cubits, and divine blueprints, and maybe, just maybe, you'll whisper, I bet God had a hand in that one too. But for now, you're drifting again, far from the desert, far from the tabernacle. Just you, a soft hum, and dreams shaped like golden lampstands. You're still floating somewhere between golden lampstands and half-finished towers, and now a gentle breeze picks up. You catch a scent in it. Not incense this time, but something older, earthier, like sheep, and sandals, and long walks across landscapes that never seem to end, because tonight your feet are heading straight into the desert. Not just any desert, the one where Moses wandered, where prophets heard voices, and where manna fell like snowflakes from heaven. And that, right there, is your next curious question. What exactly was manna, and how did it taste? You take a deep breath and step into the wilderness. There's sand in your shoes almost immediately. You're walking with a group of exhausted people in linen robes, all sunburned and slightly annoyed. The Israelites have been traveling for days, maybe weeks, maybe years. It all blurs together. And they're hungry. So hungry. You hear the muttering start. We had better food in Egypt. At least there were cucumbers. I would kill for a garlic clove right now. Classic humans. Escape slavery one day, complain about the menu the next. Then, like a scene from a celestial cooking show, God delivers. You wake up one morning, and the ground is sprinkled with something delicate and white, like frost, but edible. It's strange. It melts in the sun. It spoils if you hoard it, and no one knows exactly what it is. So they call it manna, which roughly translates to, what? Is it? Seriously, the food is literally named after confusion. You crouch down and pick up a piece. It's light. It glimmers slightly. You pop it in your mouth and, it's not bad. A bit like honey wafers, or maybe coriander crackers. A little sweet, a little nutty, somewhere between breakfast cereal and mystery candy. And suddenly you get it, you could survive on this. You wouldn't love it forever, but you wouldn't starve either. In fact, it said the Israelites ate manna every single day for 40 years. That's a lot of mystery wafers. Now imagine being one of them, waking up each morning to gather your portion, no more, no less. Learning not to hoard, learning to trust that tomorrow the supply will come again, unless it's the Sabbath. Then you collect double the day before. Some modern scholars have tried to explain manna scientifically. Maybe it was tree sap. Maybe it was insect secretion. Yum. Maybe it was fungus or mold or something the desert coughed up. Honestly, doesn't really matter, because to the people at the time, manna wasn't about biology. It was about survival. It was about daily grace. Bread from heaven, served fresh every morning. And yet, of course, they got tired of it. After a few years, the Israelites basically said, "Okay, God, this is nice. But do you have a specials menu?" They wanted meat. They wanted leeks. They wanted anything but the eternal frosted flakes of holiness, which is very relatable. Can you blame them? Imagine eating the same exact granola bar every single day for 4 decades. No chocolate chips, no flavor variations, just pure celestial beige. Still, you wonder, what if it wasn't just food? What if manna was a spiritual lesson disguised as a snack? Because every morning it was a chance to say, I have enough. No Costco, no prepping, no hoarding and anxiety, just enough. For today. And that is radical. You wander further into the dust, your belly full of imaginary manna, and the sand crunches underfoot. The desert stretches endlessly in every direction, dry, ancient, whispering secrets in the wind. And then, faintly, you hear singing. You turn, a group of women is dancing. Their voices rise like the wind, high, fierce, joyful. It's Miriam, sister of Moses. She's leading a song of victory after the Red Sea moment, the one where the waters parted, and Pharaoh's army got a very unexpected swimming lesson. You remember that scene, right? The Israelites stand before the sea, trapped. Behind them, chariots roar, and Moses raises his staff. There's a moment, still and heavy, before the impossible happens. The sea splits. Walls of water rise like skyscrapers. Fish swim sideways, confused, and a dry path appears. You can almost feel it, the cool dampness of the seabed, the stunned silence of everyone stepping onto it, the thunder of hooves fading behind them, and when they cross safely, when the sea crashes back down like divine punctuation, there's nothing left to do but sing. That's what you're hearing now. Miriam's tambourine, the echo of voices across time, a celebration not just of survival, but of freedom, of walking away from fear and into something wild and new, even if that something is just more desert. Because here's the twist. Freedom, didn't lead to paradise. It led to wandering, to manna and dust and mystery lessons in trust. The promised land was still a long way off. You look down at your hands. You're still holding a piece of manna, still wondering what it really was, still marveling that something so strange could carry people through. Some say God used manna to teach gratitude. Others say it was about discipline or humility or divine parenting. Eat what you're given. Still others think it was just a reminder, every single morning, that the people weren't alone, that no matter how weird life got, help would show up. Quietly, without labels, just enough. You look back over the sand, and the desert seems softer now, less harsh, more like a classroom, a very dusty, sunburned classroom. And you're learning. You're learning that not all miracles glow in the dark or part oceans. Some just melt at noon and taste like coriander. So the next time you open your pantry and you sigh at the options, think about manna. Think about 40 years of breakfast you didn't choose but couldn't live without, and then whisper, what is it? Because maybe the miracle isn't always the food itself. Maybe it's the fact that it keeps showing up, even in the middle of nowhere, even when you're tired, even when you're still wandering, and with that, the desert fades behind you. The sand slips away. You feel your feet lift a little, your breath slow again. You're full now, full of stories, full of mystery, full of just enough. The wind hushes. The stars blink above, and you're ready for whatever's next. The night deepens, and your body sinks even lower into the mattress. But your mind, it's still walking. This time through tall grass, golden and dry, stirred by the whisper of an ancient breeze. You follow the sound of a gentle bleating. One sheep, then two, then a whole flock, scattered across a hillside under a lavender sky, and in the middle of it all, there's a boy with a slingshot. Ah yes, David. You know him. Giant slayer, psalm writer, future king. But right now, he's just the youngest brother stuck with sheep duty. And tonight's big question is one you may have never dared to ask. Did David actually fight a giant, or just a very tall guy? You sit down on a rock beside him. David looks young, maybe 15. His sandals are dusty. His eyes, though, are sharp, watchful. You can tell he's the kind of kid who notices everything. The crackle of a twig, the rustle in the bushes, the precise arc needed to launch a stone from a slingshot and land it squarely between a lion's eyes. Yes, he claims he did that. Lions, bears, no big deal. But tonight, he's telling you about Goliath. You lean in. The story you know goes like this. The Philistines send out their champion, a hulking armored giant named Goliath, over 9 feet tall, with a javelin the size of a street lamp and armor heavier than your average IKEA couch. He taunts the Israelite army for 40 days, daring anyone to fight him. No one steps forward. Until David, the teenage shepherd with no sword, no armor, and no military experience, volunteers. Because apparently, he's built different. He picks up 5 smooth stones from a brook, loads one into his sling, winds it up, and whack! Goliath goes down like a felled tree. The army explodes in cheers. David becomes an instant legend. That's the version you've always heard. But tonight you pause and ask, wait, 9 feet tall? Really? Because let's be honest, how tall was Goliath really? That's where the story gets a little chewy. Some ancient texts say he was over 9 feet tall, around 3 meters. Other sources like the Dead Sea Scrolls and some versions of the Septuagint, Greek Old Testament, say 6'9", about 2 meters. Which, okay, still tall. But in today's world, that's NBA height. Not quite I smell the clouds. Tall. So what's the truth? Historians and archaeologists have debated this for decades. Some argue Goliath may have had a genetic condition, gigantism, caused by a pituitary tumor. It makes you grow extremely tall, but can cause poor vision and slow reflexes. Helpful info if you're a shepherd boy aiming at someone's forehead. Others say Goliath was just the biggest guy in a region of average-sized warriors, and legends have a way of stretching over time. You picture David now, gripping his sling. The crowd is watching, the Philistine army sneering. Goliath, however tall he truly was, has been mocking Israel's God and calling out their manhood. And here comes David. No armor, no sword, just a shepherd's bag and a stone. And this isn't just courage. It's defiance. It's David saying, I don't need to play by your rules. And that's maybe the most beautiful part of the story. He doesn't fight power with power. He fights arrogance with creativity. Muscle with precision, because when you think about it, a sling was actually an advanced weapon for the time. In the hands of a skilled slinger, it could launch stones at up to 100 miles per hour. That's baseball pitch fast. Fast enough to crack a skull. You imagine that one stone, smooth from the river, flying through the air like a whispered prayer and landing exactly where it needs to. Then silence. Then awe. Then a new king in the making, standing over a fallen enemy. Of course, history always gets muddled. Some later traditions claim Goliath wasn't killed by David at all, but by another warrior named Elhanan. It's in 2 Samuel 21:19, if you're feeling curious. Scholars scratch their heads over this, suggesting copyist errors, multiple giants, or just the messiness of oral storytelling passed down for centuries. But you're not here for footnotes. You're here for what it felt like, and it felt like one small person stood up and said, enough. That matters, whether Goliath was 9 feet or 6'9", whether the armor was iron or bronze, whether the story is literal, legendary, or somewhere in between, because every generation faces its own giants. Not all of them wear helmets or carry spears. Some wear suits and carry microphones. Others whisper in your own head, telling you you're too small, too young, too weak. But David's story says, actually, you might be enough. You shift on the rock. David's already looking off into the distance, dreaming of palaces, battles, betrayal, music. His life will be messy, deeply human. But right now, he's just a boy with a slingshot and a fire inside. You remember that feeling. You've had your own stones, your own giants, your own moments where everyone said, you can't. And you still stood up, because maybe faith isn't about having all the answers. Maybe it's just about walking into the valley with the tools you have, trusting that the rest will show up. The sheep bleat again. The sun dips lower. And you find yourself back on the path carrying a pebble in your hand. It's smooth, simple, slightly cool to the touch. You hold it tightly, not because you're ready for a fight, but because you finally believe you could survive one. So next time someone tells you a story that feels impossible, ask, what part of this is legend? And what part is true in a different way? And maybe, just maybe, you'll find out that even if the giant wasn't a giant, the courage still was. You walk on. The valley fades. And somewhere in the distance, a harp begins to play. Soft, steady, timeless. You don't need to know who holds it. You just need to listen. You're still walking, soft dirt under your feet, the kind that muffles every step like a secret being kept by the earth. The air grows warmer now, like someone just lit a fire a few tents over. You start to smell roasted meat, maybe lamb, or goat. Hard to tell, but definitely charred, definitely ancient. Your sandals crunch over gravel. You lift a flap of thick woven fabric and duck into a flickering tent. Inside it's busy, bustling, overcrowded. Somewhere in here, Abraham is trying to feed 3 very mysterious guests. Yes, that Abraham, the man who, according to the Bible, packed up everything, left his homeland behind, and just started walking, because God said, trust me. That Abraham and the 3 guests? Well, that's tonight's question. Did God show up for dinner? The scene is oddly cozy, in a 3000 BC desert hospitality kind of way. The fire crackles. A servant runs, by with a jug of milk. Another kneads dough for fresh flatbread. And Abraham, he's nervously pacing, checking the goat meat, fluffing the pillows, smoothing the sand. He's sweating a little, because these guests aren't just anyone. They're, well, it's unclear. Genesis 18 tells the story like this. Abraham is chilling by his tent in the heat of the day, maybe sipping goat's milk, fanning himself, when suddenly he looks up and sees 3 men standing nearby. No introduction. No trumpet sounds, just boom, there they are. And Abraham jumps up, runs to meet them, bows low, and offers food, water, and rest. For the record, if you ever want someone to treat you like royalty, show up near their tent in ancient Mesopotamia. Hospitality wasn't just polite, it was sacred. But here's where things get weird. As Abraham rushes to prepare this meal, tender calf, fresh bread, creamy curds, one of the 3 men starts talking. And it's God, like capital G, God. Not an angel, not a messenger. Just straight up Yahweh asking about Sarah, Abraham's wife, and casually dropping future news. She'll have a baby next year. And Sarah, who's listening from behind the tent wall, laughs. Not out loud. It's more like that cynical snort you make when someone says, "You could still be a pop star." She's 90. Abraham's 100. The idea of them having a child at this point? Yeah, it's sitcom material. And yet the voice says, "Why did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord?" And you pause, spoon halfway to your mouth, because this whole scene suddenly crackles with something electric. 3 strangers, one of them speaking like God. And nobody, not even Abraham, seems especially fazed by this. So you whisper, "Wait, was that really God? Let's unpack that." Some traditions interpret the 3 visitors as angels, sent to deliver divine messages and carry out divine errands. Spoiler: Sodom and Gomorrah are about to go kaboom. Others believe the Lord himself appeared accompanied by 2 angels. Christian theologians have even suggested this is a rare Old Testament glimpse of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, disguised as travelers hungry for goat stew. It's called a theophany, a moment where God appears in human form. And while the logistics of feeding God a dairy-based appetizer might be confusing, the meaning here is powerful. The divine shows up in the ordinary. You picture Abraham now, nervously asking if the curds are too salty. God himself, maybe reclining slightly, fingers greasy from roasted meat, nodding politely. It's a strange image. But maybe it's not as strange as you think. Because how often does the holy sneak into moments you'd never expect? A cup of tea with a friend. A late-night phone call that changes everything. A stranger's smile on the worst day of your year. That's what this story whispers. God doesn't always thunder from mountaintops. Sometimes he just shows up for lunch. And about that lunch, let's talk logistics. Did Abraham really serve meat and dairy together? That's a big no-no in later Jewish dietary laws. But here, it's all on the same plate. No rabbis, no kosher kitchens. Just generous portions and anxious hospitality. Some scholars say this moment predates the law. Others say the Bible's not a cookbook. You just nod, chewing slowly, appreciating the butteriness of historical contradiction. Because this is the kind of story that resists being boxed in. And just when you think it can't get stranger, Abraham walks the guests out, and one of them pauses, looks down the road, mentions Sodom. You remember that city, infamous, wild, violent, hopeless. And now the visitor speaks as God again, wondering out loud whether to tell Abraham what's about to happen. There's something almost human in that hesitation, as if God, almighty, omniscient, eternal, is wrestling with transparency. He decides yes. He tells Abraham that Sodom's wickedness is too much, judgment is coming, and Abraham does something absolutely bonkers. He negotiates, like he's haggling at a marketplace. What if there are 50 good people in the city? God says, "Okay, then I won't destroy it." 45? Okay. 40? Still okay. All the way down to 10. And each time, God listens. You blink. Is this allowed? Can you really bargain with the divine? Apparently, yes. Because the God of this story isn't just powerful. He's relational. He listens. He responds. He's willing to dialogue with a dust-covered nomad over the fate of a city. It's also intimate. Food, laughter, doubt, debate. You start to realize this isn't a story about grand miracles or heavenly fire, though that's coming soon. This is about the close-up God, the one who eats your bread, hears your worries, challenges your cynicism, the one who shows up not to judge first, but to talk. As the tent fades around you, you hear Sarah's laughter echo one more time, not mocking now, more like wonder. The kind of laugh that happens when the impossible starts to feel possible again. You step outside. The desert is wide, silent, filled with stars. Maybe God isn't just above you tonight. Maybe he's beside you, walking the path, picking goat meat from his teeth, and wondering what you'll ask him next. And maybe, just maybe he'll answer, or smile, or offer you seconds. And either way, you'll be full. The sand crunches quietly beneath your feet again, like breadcrumbs left behind on a desert trail of strange, holy encounters. You're still thinking about Abraham's dinner party, the flatbread, the dairy, the awkward tension of laughing at God, and you haven't even digested it yet when something sharp enters your nostrils. It's sulfur, or at least something like it. Acrid, bitter, like a barbecue that went terribly wrong. The wind shifts. The sky is darker now, not just night dark, but heavy dark. The kind of dark where something is about to happen. Something no one wants to talk about. And that something is Sodom and Gomorrah. Yes, we're going there. Tonight, the question drifting through your sleepy brain is, did it really rain fire from the sky? Let's set the scene. 2 of the 3 visitors who dined with Abraham are now in the city of Sodom. That's right, those mysterious men just kept walking as if their job wasn't quite done. And Sodom? Well, it's not exactly giving off the friendliest vibes. It's late. The city gates creak. A man named Lot sees them and instantly reacts like someone who's watched way too many true crime documentaries. You can't stay in the city square overnight. Come to my house. Now. He knows something. He knows that Sodom isn't safe after dark. Not for strangers, not even for longtime residents. Hospitality in this city isn't sacred. It's suspect. It might get you in serious trouble. The visitors accept Lot's offer. He makes them dinner, maybe something less glamorous than Abraham's feast. No roasted calf, perhaps just lentils and flatbread. But before they can sleep, there's pounding at the door. Men from the city, all of them, banging, demanding. And what they're demanding isn't just shelter. It's violation. It's domination. It's the very definition of cruelty. Now pause, here. Because this part of the Bible has been used and misused for centuries. People have twisted it to justify all kinds of things. But what's unmistakable in the text is that Sodom is a place where the vulnerable are not safe, and where violence is normalized. It's not about love. It's about power without compassion. And Lot? Well, he tries to protect his guests, but then offers up his own daughters instead. Yeah, that's in the story. You kind of wish it weren't. It's the kind of moral mess that makes your stomach churn a bit harder than the goat milk did. The angels, yes, the 2 guests are angels, by the way. Surprise. Intervene. They strike the men at the door blind. They tell Lot to get out, now, because something's coming, something fiery. And here's where things really heat up. Literally. The angels pull Lot, his wife, and his 2 daughters out of the city. They say, don't look back. Not in a metaphorical way, like physically don't look back. But as they flee, Lot's wife does. And she becomes a pillar of salt. Let's pause again, because that's odd, right? A pillar of salt. Like some kind of divine kitchen experiment gone wrong. Some historians and geologists have suggested that the region, especially near the Dead Sea, is full of natural salt deposits. Maybe she was caught in the explosion and encased in minerals. Maybe the salt is symbolic. Maybe it's just unknowable. But it sticks in your imagination, doesn't it? A woman frozen mid-turn. Crystallized regret. The Bible doesn't tell us her name. But it makes her a warning. When you escape destruction, don't long for what was killing you. Then, as the family disappears into the hills, it happens. The Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah, from the Lord out of the heavens. It's one of the most terrifying sentences in ancient scripture. You almost hear the sizzle. But here's the thing. Was it really fire from heaven? Well, let's ask the ancient rocks. The region around the Dead Sea has long fascinated geologists and archaeologists. Some believe a massive natural disaster really did occur, possibly a meteor or a violent earthquake that released natural gas and bitumen, setting off explosive fires. One theory focuses on Tal el-Hammam, a site in Jordan, that shows signs of an ancient blast so intense that mud brick walls melted into glass. A cosmic airburst, maybe. Think Tunguska, but biblical. If that's true, Sodom's destruction may have been both miraculous and geological. A natural event, timed so perfectly, so symbolically, that people couldn't help but see the hand of God behind it. And maybe that's the point. Whether the flames were divine or tectonic, the lesson burned into the collective memory was clear. When cruelty becomes the culture, collapse isn't far behind. Now here's something no Sunday school ever taught you. In ancient Jewish writings, like the Book of Ezekiel, the sin of Sodom is described not just as sexual violence, but arrogance, gluttony, and neglect of the poor. That's right. The city burned because of selfishness, because no one cared for the hungry, because the rich built walls and locked gates while beggars starved on the steps, and you start to feel the heat of that story now. Not just in your imagination, but in your conscience. It's not just about sulfur and fire. It's about how a place loses its soul, and how sometimes the only way forward is to leave the whole place behind. You think again about Lot's wife, salt, still, facing the past. And you wonder, if you had to run, what would you turn back for? That house you built? That life you pretended to love? That toxic comfort you couldn't let go? No judgment here, just questions whispered on desert winds. The cities are ashes now. Smoke spirals into the sky like a final exhale. Lot and his daughters shelter in a cave. It's quiet there. Too quiet. And, for the record, what happens next? With Lot and his daughters? Let's just say it's complicated. We'll let that cave stay closed for tonight. You step away from the burning plain. The ground under your feet is cooling. The stars are returning. Somewhere behind you, something just ended, and somewhere ahead a new path begins. You walk a little faster now, trying not to look back, just in case. Your feet have carried you far now, away from burning cities and salty statues, through wilderness whispers and the ghost of ash in your lungs. You're not sure how much time has passed. Days, decades, but the land is changing again. It's greener, wilder. There are sheep on the hills and flocks drifting like clouds of wool, and in the distance you hear something, singing, low, melodic, rough but beautiful. You step closer and realize it's not just one voice. It's a chorus of psalms, of prayers, of ancient tunes passed down by calloused hands. And in the middle of it all, under the shade of a twisted olive tree, there's a man. A boy, really, with a slingshot at his hip and trouble in his eyes. Tonight, you've stumbled into the middle of a story that somehow feels part underdog sports movie, part Game of Thrones prequel, and part bedtime folktale your grandma wouldn't tell unless the power was out. Because tonight's question is, how big was Goliath? Really? Let's start with the facts, or at least the facts as they're told in the Bible. In 1 Samuel 17, Goliath is described as a giant, specifically 6 cubits and a span tall. Now, unless you happen to carry a cubit stick in your back pocket, that probably means nothing to you. So let's translate. 6 cubits, and a span equals roughly 9 feet and 9 inches. Or, as your chiropractor might say, a lifetime of spinal trauma. But here's the twist. Not all ancient texts agree on Goliath's height. Some older manuscripts like the Dead Sea Scrolls say 4 cubits and a span. That's closer to 6'9". Still tall, sure, but more NBA center than Marvel villain. So which is it? Was Goliath a mountain, or just a really large man with an unfortunate taste in bronze fashion? Well, here's where things get fuzzy. The story of David and Goliath wasn't just history. It was symbol. The people telling it weren't writing an ESPN recap. They were crafting something epic, something moral, something unforgettable. And what better way to make a hero look brave than to make his opponent literally larger than life? You picture Goliath now, towering above the valley floor, his armor clanking like kitchen pots during an earthquake. The Bible says his coat of mail weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze. That's about 125 pounds. His spear shaft? Like a weaver's beam, whatever that means, but the tip alone? Another 15 pounds. It's like fighting a refrigerator that went to war. And across from him is David, a teenager. No armor, no sword, just a sling and 5 smooth stones. Now, don't be fooled by the slingshot time or child's toy thing. The ancient world slingers were lethal, skilled enough to hit a bird mid-flight. The stones they used weren't pebbles. They were the size of tennis balls, often made of dense limestone or even lead. A slinger could launch one at over 100 kilometers per hour. That's not a warning shot. That's a headshot. But it still feels wild, doesn't it? That this kid, probably no older than 15, walks into the valley, refusing armor, refusing a sword, and says something that would make any action movie director proud. You come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord. Then he runs, toward Goliath, and one stone, just one, right between the eyes. Goliath drops like a felled tree. And David? He picks up the giant's own sword and finishes the job. It's the ancient equivalent of, yeah, I'll take your weapon and raise you a victory dance. Let's take a breath, because this isn't just a battle story, it's a reversal. In ancient Israelite culture, the older son gets the inheritance. The warrior wears armor. The king rules with power. But here, none of that happens. Young one wins. The weak becomes strong. The underdog changes history. Which brings us to an odd little fact. David wasn't even supposed to be there. His dad literally sent him to deliver lunch to his brothers. So yes, David started as the pizza delivery guy and ended as the national hero. What does that say about giants? About what we fear? You know, some historians think Goliath might have had a medical condition, acromegaly, a hormonal disorder that causes gigantism. People with it often grow very tall, but also suffer from vision problems, slow reflexes, and joint pain. If that's true, Goliath may have been big, but vulnerable. So the fight wasn't impossible. It was unexpected. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the real message of the story isn't that giants are unbeatable. It's that they're not always what they seem. That sometimes the loudest threat is the easiest to bring down. You feel the wind shift again. David has vanished into the folds of history, off to write psalms, dodge spears from King Saul, and dance badly in public. But before he leaves, he turns to you. Just once and says, don't be afraid of big things. Just be afraid of standing still. And maybe you believe him, because the world still has its Goliaths. Debt, disease, deadlines, broken relationships, broken systems, broken hearts. But maybe, just maybe, you've got a sling. And maybe that's enough. The olive tree fades behind you now. The music is quieter. The sheep are dreaming of better pastures. And you're walking forward again, your feet steady, your mind lighter. The next story is just ahead. You're walking through a dry field now, the air warm and still. The kind of stillness that settles just before something dramatic happens in a soap opera. It's too quiet. Even the bugs seem to be holding their breath. And then, there's a rustle, a low thud, a sudden gust of wind that smells sweet. You round a bend, and there it is. A table. No, not just any table. A banquet table. Set right there in the wilderness. Piles of figs, goblets of wine, lamb roasting on a spit. All of it completely unattended, like you've stumbled into some divine picnic while the host popped out for a moment. And sitting at the head of the table, scribbling into a scroll, is a man with a beard, ink-stained fingers, and the look of someone who's argued with God, and maybe even won once or twice. Tonight, you're joining a feast of words and poetry, because this next question is quiet but deep, like a river running under your house. Did King David really write the Psalms? Let's start with what people often assume. King David, slayer of giants, player of harps, dancer in linen undergarments, sat down one afternoon, cracked his knuckles, and wrote 150 psalms like it was a Spotify playlist for spiritual moods. Happy? Psalm 23. Angry? Psalm 3. Betrayed? Psalm 55. But here's the twist. Scholars are still debating how many of those poetic outbursts David actually wrote himself. You see, many psalms are attributed to David, about 73 of them in fact. But others are credited to different names. Asaph, the sons of Korah, Solomon, even Moses. Yes, that Moses. The Red Sea guy moonlighted as a songwriter, apparently. And some psalms? They're anonymous, like mysterious love letters from heaven with no return address. So what's going on here? Well, the word of David, in Hebrew, li David, doesn't always mean written by. It can mean about David, in the style of David, or even for David. That's right. In ancient Hebrew, prepositions are basically the Wild West. So while David may have written a good chunk of the Psalms, especially the ones that feel deeply personal, like Psalm 51, "Have mercy on me, O God," or Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd," he probably wasn't the sole author of the entire book. Think of it more like a playlist curated over centuries, with David as the lead artist and dozens of other voices featured on different tracks. Psalms were added, edited, arranged, and passed down over generations. A living mixtape of emotion and faith. And emotions, oh, the emotions. That's what makes the Psalms so captivating. They are raw. One minute you're soaring through heavenly praises, the next you're face down in despair, sobbing about enemies hiding in caves. If you've ever had a day that started with yoga and ended with eating cold pizza while crying in your car, you get it. Take Psalm 13. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? And then a few lines later, but I trust in your unfailing love. Whiplash. Emotional chaos. Ancient journaling. But that's exactly why the Psalms have lasted. Because they don't pretend faith is easy. They don't offer nice, clean answers. They rage, they weep, they dance, and sometimes all in the same psalm. In a way, they remind you of your own mind late at night. You ever lie in bed and spiral from existential dread to, did I forget to lock the door? To, I should call my mom? To, is there a God? To, what if squirrels could talk? Yeah. David gets that energy. Now, here's a fun, weird fact. Some scholars believe that the Psalms were meant to be sung out loud, in public, like ancient karaoke, but with fewer disco lights and more sackcloth. In fact, the Hebrew title of the book of Psalms is Tehillim, which means praises. So you can imagine people gathered at the temple, chanting these lines together, or lone travelers whispering them under the stars while wolves howled nearby, or shepherds humming melodies to help their sheep fall asleep. And speaking of sheep, remember Psalm 23, the one where the Lord is your shepherd? Let's pause there. Because that psalm, it's not just beautiful, it's revolutionary. In a world filled with gods who were distant, vengeful, or weirdly obsessed with thunder, David described a God who walked with you, who guided, protected, and prepared a table for you, even in the presence of your enemies. Not destroyed them, just made sure you had lunch in front of them, which frankly is more savage. It's God as comforter, not conqueror, as presence, not punishment. And maybe that's what David brought to the Psalms most of all, a sense that God isn't far away in a storm cloud, but right here, humming along with your messy melody. So, did King David write the Psalms? Some. Not all. Maybe the best ones, maybe the most painful ones. But in the end, maybe that's not the point. Maybe what matters isn't who wrote them, but that someone did. Someone sat in a cave or a palace or under a tree and wrote down what they were too afraid to say out loud. And somehow those words survived exile, war, empire, translation, printing presses, and TikTok. And they found you. Right here. Tonight. You hear a rustle again. The banquet table vanishes. The roasted lamb dissolves into shadow. The man with the Scroll gives you a sleepy nod and fades into olive branches. And you're still walking, maybe humming now. Because in the silence of the night, the Psalms are still singing. Not just about God, but about you. The ground beneath your feet starts to shift. Not in a dangerous way, more like a soft ripple through sand. You're walking now along a shoreline that doesn't quite belong to any ocean you've ever seen. The waves don't crash, they hum, like someone whispering secrets in a language just out of reach. You feel it before you see it. A heaviness in the air, as if time itself just slowed down. And there, perched on a hill made of sun-bleached stone, is a throne. Not golden, not majestic, just old, worn, like it's seen too much. Sitting on that throne is a man with robes the color of dried figs. His eyes aren't cruel, but they're not soft either. He looks like someone who's held a kingdom in one hand and a sword in the other. You've just stepped into the mind of Solomon. And tonight's question is one that sparked more late-night Bible debates than pineapple on pizza. Was the Song of Songs really about love or God? Now, if you haven't read the Song of Songs before, fair warning, it's steamy. You might think of the Bible as being all rules and wrath and thou shalt not, but then you turn to Song of Songs and suddenly you're knee-deep in metaphors about doves, pomegranates, and beds perfumed with myrrh. Some lines are so intense they could double as texts you probably shouldn't send at 2 a.m. Here's one. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from the hills of Gilead. Okay. Not exactly Tinder material. But hey, in ancient times, comparing your crush to livestock was peak romance. Still, the Song of Songs, also called the Song of Solomon, is unlike anything else in the Bible. It doesn't mention God, not once. No commandments, no miracles, no plagues, just two lovers tangled up in poetry and longing. So the big question is, what's it doing in the Bible? There are two main camps here. Camp 1. It's about romantic love. Period. These folks believe the Iwang song is a celebration of human desire, messy, passionate, overwhelming, and yes, holy in its own way. It doesn't shy away from physical attraction or sensual imagery. Instead, it leans into it, saying, look, love and longing are part of creation too. This view sees the song as a counterweight to the more austere parts of Scripture. Where Leviticus draws lines, the Song of Songs dances barefoot across them. It reminds you that faith isn't just in the heavens, it's in sweaty palms, quickened pulses, and that one glance that makes your stomach drop like an elevator. You know, the one. Camp 2. It's a metaphor for divine love. This camp takes a more symbolic approach. According to them, the lovers in the poem represent something much bigger: God and Israel in the Jewish tradition, or Christ and the Church in Christian readings. In this view, the longing between the two characters reflects the soul's yearning for God, or God's relentless pursuit of humanity. It's romantic language being used to express spiritual intimacy, desire as a metaphor for devotion. Kind of like how people say, I'm on fire for God, but without the insurance. Claim both camps have compelling points. The Song of Songs is filled with such rich emotional imagery that it feels like it could hold both meanings at once. Because maybe it's not either or. Maybe it's both. Maybe Solomon, or whoever compiled these verses, knew that love in all its forms is chaotic, painful, ecstatic, and holy. Whether it's between two people or between you and the divine, it always involves risk, vulnerability, waiting by the window for someone who might never come. Now, a lesser-known fact. Some scholars believe the Song of Songs was originally performed as a drama or even a wedding ritual. Imagine that. A wedding in ancient Israel with a live poetry performance about gazelles and gardens. Ladies and gentlemen, the bride and groom will now read from the scroll of eyebrow compliments. But really it makes sense. The repetition, the back-and-forth dialogue, the vivid setting, all of it feels theatrical, almost like a dreamscape. And speaking of dreams, some parts of the song are dreams. Take this one. I looked for the one. My heart loves. I looked for him but did not find him. I will get up now and go about the city. This feels less like a poem and more like one of your own midnight wanderings. You ever wake up with someone's name in your mouth and no idea why? The song captures that strange, aching hunger that doesn't go away just because you're religious. It says, longing is not a sin. Desire is not shameful. It's part of the story, even the awkward parts, even the goat metaphors. Now let's pause for a moment on something quieter, the garden. The Song of Songs mentions gardens a lot. The woman is called a locked garden, a sealed fountain. Their love unfolds among lilies, vineyards, and spice trees. It's almost Eden-like, isn't it? Which leads some readers to think this poem is about restoration, about returning to a kind of innocence, not because it lacks passion, but because it embraces it without guilt. It's not trying to hide anything. It says, this is what it means to be alive. This is what it means to want. And in that sense, it's incredibly modern. Because let's be honest, most of us live with one foot in sacred spaces and one foot in real life. We pray while cooking dinner. We love people who make us crazy. We look for God in the middle of heartbreak and laughter, and yes, even in relationships that don't come with neat theological labels. So whether the Song of Songs is about a real couple or a cosmic metaphor, maybe its deepest truth is this: love is a mystery worth honoring. And the fact that it's in the Bible at all, that's a clue. A reminder that the sacred isn't always solemn. That joy, pleasure, and connection are not distractions from faith, they're expressions of it. The man on the hill smiles. The waves whisper one last note. The goats, yes, even the goats, gently wander off into the shadows. And you keep walking. Because the journey isn't just about facts or doctrines about facts. Sometimes it's about a song that refuses to explain itself, a song that just is, and maybe that's enough. You keep walking, but the scenery shifts again. The soft ripple of waves fades into the quiet crackle of firelight. You find yourself inside a vast tent, woven from threads that shimmer like stars caught in silk. Around you, voices murmur ancient songs not found in any book, but felt deep in the marrow. Tonight we step into one of the Bible's most enduring mysteries, something that has fascinated believers, skeptics, and scholars alike for millennia, the nature of God's sense of humor and the lighter moments in Scripture. Because let's be honest, when you think of the Bible, what usually comes to mind? Thunderstorms, commandments, epic battles, and prophecies that make your head spin. Not so much laughter. But the Bible has some pretty surprising moments that show God's playful side. Take, for instance, the story of Balaam's donkey. Picture this. Balaam, a prophet, is on his way to deliver a message. Suddenly, his donkey refuses to move. Not because it's tired, but because it sees an angel blocking the path. A terrifying figure invisible to Balaam himself. And what happens next? The donkey talks. Yes, actually talks. Now don't let that sound too silly. This isn't a cartoon episode. It's a serious moment with a very serious message. But the absurdity, the idea of a donkey talking back and scolding its owner, that's a moment of divine humor sneaking in. It's almost like God saying, sometimes you need a talking animal to wake up and see the truth. This story reminds us that God's communication doesn't always come in grand, booming proclamations. Sometimes it's subtle, ironic, and yes, even a little bit funny. And speaking of irony, here's a classic biblical moment that never fails to raise an eyebrow. The story of Jonah. Jonah, the reluctant prophet, runs away from God's call. He ends up swallowed by a giant fish, often pictured as a whale. But instead of sinking into despair, he spends 3 days and nights in the belly of this fish, praying and reflecting. You might wonder, what kind of prayer happens inside a fish? And does Jonah have a moment of fishy self-awareness? Well, this is one way to get closer to God. The humor here isn't slapstick. It's in the irony, God's plan unfolding in unexpected, even ridiculous ways. Jonah's story is a reminder that sometimes, no matter how much we try to avoid it, life's calling drags us where we need to go, and it might involve some pretty strange detours. Now, if you think the Bible's humor is just in the stories, think again. There's also a sharper, wittier kind hidden in the Proverbs and wisdom books. For example, Proverbs 26:11 says, "As a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly." Not exactly the kind of advice you'd find on a motivational poster, but it's brutally honest, and frankly pretty funny if you picture the image. This kind of humor is biting and wise at the same time. It's a way to point out human stubbornness with a wink, encouraging us to laugh at ourselves while learning something important. Of course, humor in the Bible isn't about making light of serious things. It's a reminder that faith and laughter aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, joy and humor can be powerful spiritual tools. You ever notice how Jesus sometimes uses exaggeration to make a point? Like when he says, "If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out." We don't take that literally. It's a dramatic way to say, cut out what's harmful. This dramatic exaggeration is almost theatrical, like a comedian's punchline that sticks with you because it's so outrageous. Now, here's a lesser-known fact. Some rabbis believe that laughter is a divine gift, a way God helps humans cope with the chaos of life. They see humor as sacred, a bridge between the earthly and the divine. It's like God's way of saying, "I'm here, even in the mess, the pain, the absurdity." So maybe God's humor is less about punchlines and more about presence, about the ability to smile through trials, to find light in darkness. And here's where it gets really interesting. The Bible doesn't just show us stories of divine humor, it invites us into it. It invites us to see the world with a perspective that holds both awe and laughter, because at the end of the day, you and I are walking this strange, beautiful journey. We stumble, we fall, we get up again, we love, we lose, we hope. And sometimes, when the world feels too heavy, maybe what we need is to lean back, breathe out, and chuckle at the cosmic joke we're all part of. The stars outside your tent twinkle, softly like knowing eyes. The fire crackles, casting playful shadows on the walls. You stretch, feeling a lightness that wasn't there before. Maybe this is the greatest mystery of all, that the God who created galaxies also created laughter, that faith can be deep and delightfully human. So as you close your eyes tonight, let this thought settle in, that no matter where your journey takes you, through ancient stories, puzzles of faith, or moments of doubt, you're never alone. There's a divine presence that sees the absurd, the beautiful, the heartbreaking, and smiles. Thank you for joining this gentle stroll through some of the Bible's most curious and comforting mysteries. If you enjoyed this journey, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and don't forget to share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. It's amazing to think about how many different places this story reaches now. As the night deepens, dim the lights one more time. Let the quiet hum of the evening wrap around you like a soft blanket. Let your breath slow and your thoughts drift, carried on a gentle tide of peace. Sleep well, dream softly. And remember, the mysteries, the questions, the laughter, they're all part of the beautiful, endless story we share. End of script. Sweet dreams.